Hello, welcome back. I hope you're doing very well. In this video, I'm going to show you how to send pattern change or scene change messages from the Akai Force to external hardware, things like drum machines, samplers. The reason you might want to do this is if you've got something like a drum machine, maybe a Roland TR8, and you've created a load of patterns, different patterns in it, and you want those patterns to launch in sync with the scenes on the Force. If you get them talking to each other, it means you can do all of your kind of launching with one hand, which leaves your other hand free for tweaking and other stuff. I'm going to demonstrate it on the Machine Plus, switching between scenes, but the process is exactly the same for shifting between patterns on a drum machine. Again, something like the Volca drum or the Roland TR8. There is a caveat if you're using Elektron devices, things like the Digitact and the Digitone. I'll get to that in a bit, but it does work, but there's an annoying stage to it. But anyway, the first step to this is obviously connecting the two devices. So I have MIDI out of the Force going into the Machine Plus with a 5-pin MIDI cable, standard old school cable. So if we go to Preferences and MIDI Sync, Force is the built-in 5-pin connector, and we can see that next to it we've got Sync and Track selected, which is what we want. Now if you had these two connected with USB, the target device would show up, its name would show up as an output port, and you just need to do the same thing, make sure Sync and Track is selected. So that's that bit. The next thing is to set up the MIDI on the target device. This will obviously be slightly different depending on what device you're using, but in general you would go to Settings, then MIDI. Sorry, my desk is a bit wobbly. So we can see that MIDI sync is set to receive, which is what we want, and the input device is what you need to set to whatever you're using. So I've got it set to MIDI 1, which is the Machine Plus's internal MIDI 5-pin thing. Once you've done that and you've got sync receive, sync send and all that stuff, when you've got this bit right, when you press play on the Force, the sequencer on your target device should start. And we can see that it has done. That's what we want. So that's good. So we've now got them talking to each other. So the next step on the target device is to tell it to receive or to respond to program changes. So in your MIDI settings, whichever device you're using, somewhere in there, you will see a dialog that says either MIDI change or it might say program change. And we just need to turn that on. So in this instance, what we want to do is swap between scenes. So we're saying to it, yes, we want scenes, which is good. At the moment, there's nothing triggering it. So we tap on this and we go down to program change because that's the message we're going to send it. Source is where it's coming from. It's just the same as the sync source, which is our MIDI. And then the channel, this is the channel it's going to listen to. So a few things on what this is like if you're not using a Machine Plus. If you're using something like a Roland TR8 or any drum machine, there'll be far less options here. There'll just be one option that says something like RX on or receive on for program changes, and you just need to make sure that is switched on. There will probably be a source, although a lot of devices will default to whatever sync is coming in. The important one is the channel. Now, most drum machines will default to channel 10 for this. This is the control channel. It's where it's listening for kind of MIDI informations that aren't note data. They're kind of system messages. You can change that if you want. The channel 10 isn't a special channel. It's just that it's generally not used by anything. So if you do change your listening channel, make sure it's onto a channel that has nothing else on it. You're not using it for any other things. So to recap on this bit, we've turned on program change receiving, RX on, and we have set it to channel 10. And those two things will be the same whatever device you're using. Now, there's a third stage on the Machine Plus because the machine has launch quantization just the same as the Force does. And what that means is it's a setting where when you trigger a pattern change or a scene change, it's how long it waits to make that happen. So you can set it to the end of the bar or the end of the scene or whatever. And a lot of drum machines will have a similar setting as well. Now, because we are triggering from the Force, we want the target device to respond instantly, because why that's the case will become apparent in a second. So we need to make sure that any kind of quantizing is switched off. So on the on the Machine Plus, that's under the perform setting, and you can see here that if I tap that, it's now turned off the quantization, so it will change scenes straight away. Now, if you're using a different device, that kind of option might not be available to you, because it might always change instantly. If you set all of this up and the scene changes aren't in sync, if your target device is lagging a little bit, the first thing you would want to look at is to see if it has a quantization setting that you haven't turned off somewhere. So that's that. So we've basically told the target device to listen for MIDI sync, to accept program changes, and what channel those program changes will come in on. So that's that bit done now. So if we go here, you can see I've got 3 scenes set up. So, excuse me. So on the Force, you can see I've also got 3 scenes here, which obviously are going to correspond. And what we want to do is when we trigger scene 1 happens here, scene 2, scene 2, scene 3, scene 3. So the way we do that is by creating a MIDI track. So we create a MIDI track and we go into the I/O for that MIDI track, and we need to send or assign it to our internal MIDI ports, which is Force, and then put the MIDI channel to 10, which is the program change channel that we set up on the Machine Plus. So we've done that. Now we're going to create a clip in the normal way, edit the clip, and for some bizarre reason that I don't understand, my Force always creates new clips at 5 bars and 1 beat. I don't know why it does it. I've tried to change it, but it doesn't work. So we've now got a standard MIDI clip, and we need to insert an instruction or a program change instruction. The way we do that is by tapping on the list editor. If you've never used the list editor before, basically what this does is it allows you to insert specific MIDI or automation instructions on specific steps. A bit like a tracker. If you've seen the Polyend tracker, same sort of deal. You can see here we've got nothing happening, so the first thing we need to do is insert a message somehow. So we tap on insert and we get this dialog up. Now there's a bunch of options. If we tap on type, this lets us say what type of message we want to send, and it's not an a mix automation, it's a MIDI automation. And you'll see here that it has defaulted to bar 1, beat 1, tick 0, which is the very first measure of our MIDI clip. So we're going to insert something on the very first measure, MIDI automation, and the parameter, if we tap down, again there's a million of them, not literally. If we go all the way to the bottom, you can see we've got program change, which is what we wanted. So we are now inserting a MIDI automation program change message on the very first measure of our bar. And we can see here that it's inserted it. The value here is the important one. So the value number here goes up to 127, the standard MIDI kind of range of values. And that number relates to the scene. Now, this is the one thing which is slightly unintuitive about this. The Akai Force counts from 0, right? So its starting point is 0 to 127. Every other device I've used in this way starts counting from 1. So you have to bear in mind that this number is always going to be 1 lower than this number. So our first scene on the Force is 0, but our first scene on here is 1. So we just need to bear that in mind. So that bit's done now. So what we're going to do is copy that pad onto another slot and another slot. And then we're going to, so our first pad or our first scene is sending 0. So we need to select our second one and change this to 1. So our second scene is triggering our second scene, but it's 1. Don't forget the mismatch on numbers. Same again here, and change this to 2. So now we have 3 clips which are sending 0, 1 and 2, which relate to 1, 2 and 3. I know that's a bit confusing, but once you've done it for a while, it clicks in. So what should happen now, and I'm not going to edit this if it doesn't work, we'll fault find why it isn't working, is that when I launch all of these, you should see the scenes changing in time. So I'm going to turn my launch quantization on the Force to 4 bars, and we'll see what happens. So we're on scene 1, scene 1. Scene 2, scene 2. Scene 3, scene 3. Go back to scene 2. So you can see it works perfectly, and because the program change message goes on the very first measure of the bar, it works instantly, which means that you can play these in any order. You can improvise. It doesn't have to be a set order. And this is where the caveat for the Elektron devices comes in. The Digitone and the Digitact cannot accept a program change on the first beat of the new bar. They need to receive the message on the third bar of the previous clip. So it works exactly the same. You create all the clips. It's just that if you want to move to your second scene, the MIDI automation needs to be done in the last kind of part of the preceding scene. So it's not an instantaneous thing. You're basically working in advance. I hope that makes sense. So it all works exactly the same. The problem with it is, as you can probably see, it works perfectly fine if you're working through a sequential or linear arrangement. But if you go from scene 5 back to scene 2, you will be sending the wrong program change message to the Digitact, and you'll then go out of sync. So if you are using one of those Elektron devices, the way I've done it in the past is just make your arrangement until you've completely finalized it, and don't do the MIDI program change clips until you've got the thing completely finalized, so you know exactly how the flow of your performance is going to work. Then you put them in the MIDI clips with the automation in to make sure that it all stays in sync. That's the only thing. But the way we've done it here, putting the automation in on the first beat of the first bar, just as we've done here, I've tried that on Roland TR6, I've tried it on multiple iPad apps, I've tried it on the Volca drum. They all work exactly the same, and it's great. So to recap, connect the two, sync the two on your target device, switch on program change, receive and set the channel, and turn off any launch quantization on your target device. And don't forget the mismatch, the force starts on 0 and the thing you're sending to starts on 1. So there will always be a 1-digit mismatch between the two. Anyway, I hope that was useful. As ever, thanks for watching. Cheers, bye.